In Britain, Antifa is used more like an accusation than a description. There is no Antifa headquarters, no membership card, and no national leader. So when people say Antifa did this, who are they actually talking about? The answer starts in 1985, and it is messier than either side usually admits. British anti-fascism did not begin with the internet, American politics, or viral street protest footage. Its roots go much deeper, through decades of opposition to fascist and far-right movements in Britain. But one of the key modern turning points came with Anti-Fascist Action, usually known as AFA. AFA was formed in Britain in the mid-1980s, at a time when the National Front still had a public presence, and the British National Party was emerging as a new force on the far right. AFA's argument was blunt. Fascist movements were not just groups with unpopular opinions. They were organised political forces that used public space, intimidation, recruitment, and visibility to build power. If they organised in the street, AFA believed they had to be opposed in the street. That created the central split that still shapes anti-fascism in Britain. Not whether fascism should be opposed, but how far opposition should go. Some anti-fascists focused on research, leaflets, campaigning, public meetings, community organising, and exposing extremist networks. Others believed direct confrontation and counter-mobilisation were sometimes necessary because they saw public visibility as part of how fascist movements grow. To understand Antifa in Britain, you have to understand that split. It is not one fixed organisation. It is a loose political tradition made up of different groups, networks, campaigners, researchers, and activists. Some are highly structured, others barely exist outside protest organising, and some reject the Antifa label entirely while still doing anti-fascist work. That is why the word causes so much confusion. Take hope, not hate. Its model is research-heavy. It investigates far-right movements, publishes reports, tracks extremist networks, and campaigns against racism and far-right organising. Its theory of power is information. Expose the network, show the public what is happening, organise communities, and make it harder for extremist movements to operate unnoticed. Then there are looser anti-fascist networks, including the Anti-Fascist Network, which describes itself as a network of independent grassroots groups opposing racism and fascism around the UK. Its model is more focused on mobilisation, local groups, counter-demonstrations, shared resources and legal support. These two approaches are not the same. One tries to defeat the far right through exposure and campaigning. The other is more willing to treat public space itself as the battleground. That is the supporter case at its strongest. Anti-fascists argue that the far right does not grow only through speeches and manifestos. It grows through presence, through marches, through confidence, through the feeling that certain streets, towns, or communities can be claimed. From that view, the street is a recruitment tool. Leaving it uncontested is itself a political choice. Supporters argue that anti-fascism is not about creating conflict, but responding to it before it becomes normalised. They point to Britain's history with the National Front, the BNP, the EDL, Britain First, National Action, and other far-right movements, and argue that organised resistance helped stop those movements gaining wider confidence. Their strongest argument is simple. Fascism is easier to stop before it looks powerful. Critics see something very different. They argue that parts of anti-fascism have become less about opposing fascism and more about deciding who gets to speak. The centre of that argument is no platform. Supporters of no-platform politics argue that fascist and racist movements should not be given legitimacy through events, rallies, university invitations, media appearances, or public platforms. Critics argue that this can slide from resisting fascism into shutting down political disagreement. The question becomes, who decides where the line is? If fascist means an actual neo-Nazi or openly fascist organisation, the argument is clearer. But critics say the label is sometimes stretched much further, onto nationalists, immigration critics, controversial conservatives, or people whose views are hard right, but not literally fascist. When that happens, critics argue anti-fascism stops looking defensive and starts looking like political gatekeeping. That is the critic case at its strongest. Not that fascism should be tolerated, but that some anti-fascist tactics can become intimidating, disruptive, or too broad to be trusted with the power they claim. The legal line in Britain is clearer than the political one. Anti-fascism itself is legal. Anti-fascist beliefs are legal. Researching far-right groups is legal. Campaigning against racism is legal. Counter-protesting is legal. But methods still matter. Violence remains violence. Harassment remains harassment. Criminal damage remains criminal damage. Threats remain threats. Public disorder remains public disorder. A political cause does not make illegal conduct legal. And Antifa is not a proscribed organisation in Britain. It is not a banned group, not a political party, and not a legal category in itself. It is a label, and labels have power. When activists use Antifa, they may mean resistance to fascism. When critics use it, they may mean masked intimidation or militant street politics. When media use it, they may mean almost any confrontation involving anti-fascist protesters. Same word, but a different meaning and a different fight. That is the system underneath the argument. The word Antifa has become more useful as a weapon than as a description, which is why both sides keep using it. Supporters use it to connect themselves to a long tradition of anti-fascist resistance. Critics use it to frame that tradition as disorder, intimidation, or political control. Politicians and media figures can use it even more loosely because the vaguer the word becomes, the more work it can do. So the real question is not simply what is Antifa in the UK. The better question is, who is using the word? What are they trying to make you picture? And what part of British anti-fascism are they actually talking about? Because in Britain, Antifa is not one organisation. It is a contested tradition, a political label, and a fight over who gets to control the meaning of public opposition to the far right.